They called it the golden age of Hollywood, a glittering world of flawless smiles, timeless beauty, and dreams projected onto silver screens. But behind that perfect light, there were shadows so deep they swallowed lives whole. For every standing ovation, there was a scream no one heard. For every glamour shot, a closed door that hid the truth. The stars of that era were worshipped like gods, untouchable, immaculate, and larger than life. Yet the closer you look, the more you realize their perfection wasn't real. It was engineered, built by studios that controlled not just their images, but their entire existence. The system that promised immortality demanded obedience, secrecy, and silence. And within that silence were nightmares. Abuse, addiction, lies, and tragedies buried under red carpets. Today we'll uncover 13 legendary names, icons whose private lives were so disturbing, so contradictory to their public image, that the truth feels like fiction. What you're about to hear isn't just scandal, it's a portrait of how fame consumes the human soul. Let's begin with America's most beloved Christmas voice, a man who filled homes with warmth, while his own children lived in fear. Bing Crosby, America's Christmas tyrant. Every December, Bing Crosby's voice returns like a ghost from the past, soft, nostalgic, promising peace and comfort. White Christmas still plays in malls, homes, and radio stations across the world. But the man behind that soothing baritone lived nothing like the songs he sang. To his audience, Bing was the perfect father figure, a calm, gentle soul who embodied traditional American values. To his children, he was something closer to a drill sergeant. His eldest son, Gary Crosby, would later write, "Dad wasn't the man America thought he was. The belt was his instrument, and we were his audience." Inside the Crosby mansion, discipline ruled every hour. The boys were weighed weekly, and if their weight had changed even slightly, punishment followed. They stood at attention when their father entered a room and addressed him as Sir. Smiles were for the cameras, not for home. The cruelty went unnoticed because Bing was protected by an empire of publicists. They polished his image until it shone so bright it blinded the world to his darkness. Christmas specials with his family were staged like cheerful propaganda, scripted affection over hidden pain. When Gary's memoir revealed the truth, fans were stunned. How could the man who sang of peace and goodwill rule his own home with fear? The answer lies in Hollywood's oldest magic trick, illusion. The studios built icons, not people. And Bing played his role so well, even he may have forgotten where the act ended and the man began. But Crosby wasn't alone in his deception. Another beloved figure, whose very image symbolized innocence, was hiding something far darker. Charlie Chaplin, the genius with a sinister pattern. Charlie Chaplin's Little Tramp was cinema's first great hero, a poor, bumbling man with a heart of gold. He made the world laugh through hardship and see beauty in struggle. Yet off-screen, Chaplin's private life revealed a darkness that would ruin him in today's world. Chaplin had a very specific obsession, youth. Not the artistic kind, but the literal one. His romantic interests were consistently teenage girls, many barely past childhood. At 29, he married 16-year-old Mildred Harris. A few years later, he began a relationship with 15-year-old Lita Gray, who became pregnant at 16. To avoid scandal, he married her. Their marriage was hell. Court documents later described sexual coercion, humiliation, and threats, shocking even by the moral standards of the 1920s. Chaplin's fame protected him. The studios paid settlements, silenced parents, and spun every headline until the public believed he was the victim of gold diggers. Behind the myth of the lonely clown was a man who manipulated young women using power, fame, and promises of stardom. Hollywood's executives, terrified of losing their golden goose, covered everything up. As long as Chaplin delivered box office hits, morality was negotiable. Even after scandals piled up, Chaplin was untouchable. But time doesn't protect legacies, it exposes them. The truth of his predatory behavior now stands as one of the most disturbing contradictions in film history. The man who made the world laugh preyed on its innocence, and he wasn't the only one broken by the system that made him. Sometimes Hollywood didn't just corrupt, it created destruction from the start. Marlon Brando, the genius who couldn't save his own family. Marlon Brando wasn't just a movie star, he was a revolution. When he appeared on screen in A Streetcar Named Desire, Hollywood changed overnight. Gone were the polished performances and theatrical charm. Brando brought rawness, pain, vulnerability, violence, and truth. He was magnetic because he was real. But that same intensity that electrified his art would later destroy his family. Brando's personal life was a labyrinth of chaos. He fathered at least 11 children with multiple women, yet he was rarely a father to any of them. Friends described him as brilliant but emotionally absent, a man who could embody tenderness on screen but couldn't sustain it in his own home. He moved between lovers, sets, and mansions like a restless ghost, always searching for something, always running from something else, and the chaos caught up with him. In 1990, a horrifying tragedy struck the Brando family, one that played out like a Greek drama drenched in violence. Brando's son Christian shot and killed Dag Drawlet, the boyfriend of Marlon's daughter Cheyenne, at the family's Hollywood home. The reason? Christian claimed he was protecting his sister from abuse. But the truth was murkier. Buried under years of dysfunction, jealousy, and emotional instability, the fallout was catastrophic. Christian was convicted of manslaughter and sent to prison. Cheyenne, already fragile and traumatized, spiraled into despair. 5 years later, she took her own life. She was only 25. Brando never recovered. In interviews, his once fiery energy turned hollow. His words carried the weight of guilt he couldn't shake. "I think I failed as a father," he admitted. "Actors don't make good fathers. We're never home." And yet the tragedy went deeper than absence. Those who knew him said Brando's greatest flaw was that he wanted to love humanity, but not individuals. He fought injustice, spoke against racism, championed Native American rights, but couldn't connect to the people closest to him. His story is one of duality, a man who understood human emotion more deeply than almost anyone, yet couldn't use that understanding to save the ones he loved most. Brando showed the world what it meant to feel on screen, but in real life his inability to face his own feelings destroyed everything that mattered. It's one of Hollywood's greatest ironies that the man who defined authenticity lives surrounded by illusion. Judy Garland, the studio's manufactured tragedy. When audiences first saw Judy Garland skip down the yellow brick road, they saw pure magic. But what they didn't see was the pill in her pocket, placed there by the studio that owned her. At just 13, MGM executives decided Judy needed to stay camera perfect. That meant no weight gain, no fatigue, no freedom. To keep her slim, they prescribed amphetamines. To help her sleep, barbiturates. By 16, she was chemically dependent on a cocktail designed by men in suits, not doctors. Her workdays lasted up to 18 hours. She'd shoot scenes all day, take pills all night, then wake up to do it again. If her energy dropped, there were more pills. If she complained, she was called ungrateful. Studio head Louis B. Mayer reportedly referred to her as "my little hunchback" when she struggled with exhaustion and teenage growth. They built her into a product, not a person, and when the product began to break, they threw her away. Garland's later years were a cycle of collapse and comeback. She'd rise on stage, dazzling the world with her voice, then vanish into rehab or despair. The drugs that once kept her camera ready became her cage. When she died at 47, the autopsy called it accidental. But those who knew her said the truth more clearly. Her death began when she was 13 and MGM handed her her first pill. Hollywood sold her innocence and then consumed it. But while Garland's tragedy was the price of being overexposed, others suffered because they had to hide everything about who they really were. Rock Hudson, the star who couldn't be himself. To millions of women, Rock Hudson was the ultimate leading man, tall, charming, the perfect husband in every romantic fantasy. But Hudson's real life was a carefully constructed performance, one that cost him everything. In the 1950s, being openly gay in Hollywood was career suicide. Studios didn't just discourage it, they erased it. When Rock signed with Universal, his manager made it clear his love life was now property of the studio. Every date, every photo, every whisper was planned. They paired him with starlets for staged outings, planted stories in fan magazines, even arranged a marriage of convenience to silence rumors. Hudson lived every day as two people, the adored screen idol and the man terrified of being found out. The lie was exhausting. He couldn't relax, couldn't speak freely, couldn't trust anyone. Even at private parties, he worried someone might sell him out. The emotional weight of that secret was crushing, yet for decades he smiled through it. Then in 1985, the truth emerged in the worst way imaginable. Hudson became one of the first celebrities to die from AIDS. His death didn't just shatter his image, it forced America to confront the cost of its hypocrisy. The man they adored as a symbol of masculinity had been living a secret life of fear. In the end, Rock Hudson gave the world love stories he never got to live himself. And while he died trapped by lies, another Hollywood legend spent her life trapped by her own, one she invented to survive. Loretta Young, the woman who adopted her own child. Loretta Young was Hollywood's image of virtue, a devout Catholic, graceful, pure, and endlessly moral. She built her entire career on being the embodiment of goodness. But behind that spotless facade was a secret so extraordinary, so heartbreaking that it could only exist in the morally twisted world of old Hollywood. Loretta Young gave birth to a child, then adopted her own baby to hide the scandal. It began in 1935 on the set of The Call of the Wild, where she starred opposite Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood. Their chemistry was undeniable, and soon their affair began. But Gable was married, and Loretta was the wholesome darling of the screen. When she became pregnant, she faced an impossible choice: reveal the truth and destroy both careers, or vanish and fabricate an entirely new story. She chose the second. Loretta disappeared for months, claiming to be ill. She secretly gave birth to a daughter, Judy, and then handed the infant to a Catholic orphanage. 19 months later, she adopted her own biological child, pretending she had been found and taken in. For decades, the truth remained buried. Even her daughter grew up believing she was adopted, unaware that her real mother was right there, calling herself Mama. When the secret finally surfaced years later, Judy was in her 30s. The revelation shattered her and Loretta too. The most haunting detail? Loretta arranged for her little girl to have cosmetic surgery on her ears to reduce their resemblance to Clark Gable's. The price of Hollywood purity was a child's identity, rewritten, erased, and rebranded to fit an image. Loretta carried that secret until her death in 2000. She never publicly admitted it, even though everyone by then knew. Her story wasn't just about shame, it was about survival. In an era where a woman's virtue was her only currency, she traded truth for safety. But not all secrets in Hollywood were born from fear. Some came from unchecked power, the kind that believed it could take anything and still walk away smiling. Errol Flynn, the hero who became the villain. If Hollywood had a face for adventure, it was Errol Flynn, the man who swung from ropes, fought sword duels, and kissed women with effortless charm. He was the very definition of charisma, rebellion, and masculine freedom, but beneath that roguish grin lay a life so corrupt, so self-destructive, that even Hollywood's fixers struggled to contain it. In 1942, Flynn was charged with the statutory rape of two teenage girls, aged 16 and 17. The trial became a national sensation. The defense painted him as the victim of opportunists, and his fans, mostly women, flooded the courthouse screaming his name. When he was acquitted, the phrase "in like Flynn" became a slang term for getting lucky. But the truth behind it wasn't charming, it was horrifying. Flynn's appetite for excess consumed everything: women, alcohol, and power. He hosted parties aboard his yacht, ironically named the Zaka, where underage girls, drugs, and chaos were common. Those who attended described a man who lived without boundaries, as if the world existed solely for his pleasure. By the time he was 50, the swashbuckler was a ghost of himself. Years of abuse had destroyed his body and mind. The coroner's report listed the organs of a 70-year-old. The man who had once been the hero of millions died broke, drunk, and disgraced. Flynn's downfall was more than a personal tragedy, it was a reflection of Hollywood's sickness. The studios protected him, cleaned up his messes, and used his charm as a mask for exploitation. For years, people said he played the part too well, but the truth was simpler: the part was him. And while Flynn's demons destroyed him from the inside out, another Hollywood icon was being destroyed by the machine itself. A system that didn't just use people, it manufactured their destruction. Jerry Lewis, the comedian who couldn't love. For decades, Jerry Lewis was America's funny man, the elastic-faced clown who made millions laugh and cry. His slapstick routines made him a legend, and his telethons for Jerry's kids turned him into a symbol of compassion. To the world, he was the comedian with a heart of gold. But to his own family, he was something entirely different. His sons called him a monster. They described growing up under a man who demanded obedience, worship, and silence. He wasn't just a father, he was a dictator in a comedian's body. Gary Lewis, his eldest, once said, "Dad was like two different people. The man who hugged strangers on television couldn't even look his own children in the eyes. At home, there were rules for everything: how to sit, how to speak, how to eat. Breaking them brought punishment, not laughter. And when Jerry wasn't enforcing his will on his sons, he was ignoring them completely." But the real cruelty came decades later. After his death in 2017, his will revealed something shocking. Jerry Lewis had disinherited all 6 of his biological sons, leaving everything to his second wife and their adopted daughter. The man who raised billions for sick children left his own without a cent, not even an acknowledgement, and there was more. For years, a woman named Susan Minette claimed to be Lewis's secret daughter, born from an affair with a model in the 1960s. DNA testing supported her claim. Yet Jerry never met her, never spoke her name, never admitted she existed. How could a man who built a public image around compassion be so cold privately? Maybe because Jerry Lewis never loved people, he loved being loved. His kindness was a performance, scripted and televised, and that's the theme that runs through every story here. Performance. Whether it was Jerry's televised sympathy or Rock Hudson's fake romance, Hollywood turned human beings into characters that even they couldn't live up to. But not every secret was born of cruelty or ego. Some came from something far more tragic, a single random act that changed everything. Jean Tierney, the fan who destroyed her life. Jean Tierney was the definition of elegance. Her face, sharp, symmetrical, unforgettable, was painted across movie posters and wartime morale ads. But her beauty hid a private grief so cruel, so undeserved, that it became one of Hollywood's most haunting stories. In 1943, while pregnant with her first child, Jean attended a military charity event at the Hollywood Canteen. The doctors had warned her, stay away from large crowds. Rubella was spreading, but she went anyway, eager to entertain soldiers. Among those soldiers was a fan, a young woman who had snuck out of quarantine just to meet her idol. That single handshake changed everything. Jean contracted rubella, and when her daughter Daria was born, she was blind, deaf, and severely disabled. Years later, Jean met that same fan again, and the woman, smiling, confessed, "I just had to see you that night, Miss Tierney." It was only then Jean realized what had happened. Her fan's devotion had destroyed her child's life. The guilt consumed her. The studios still wanted her beauty, but Jean was fading inside. Depression swallowed her. She underwent brutal electroshock treatments that damaged her memory. She was institutionalized, lost roles, and lost years. Her tragedy wasn't about scandal or sin, it was about how even admiration can turn monstrous. She once said, "I was a beautiful woman whose beauty brought nothing but pain, and that pain, raw, unfair, and entirely human, was the price of fame she never asked for." Mary Astor, the diary that shattered Hollywood's illusion. In the 1930s, Mary Astor was everything Hollywood wanted women to be: poised, graceful, and impossibly refined. On-screen, she was the epitome of elegance. Off-screen, she was the picture of dignity. Her voice, her gestures, her very presence whispered restraint. But beneath that flawless exterior, Astor hid a secret written in her own hand. A diary that would rip open Hollywood's carefully stitched moral fabric. The year was 1936. Astor's private life was collapsing. She was trapped in a bitter custody battle with her ex-husband, Dr. Franklin Thorpe. In an act of pure vengeance, Thorpe claimed he had her personal diary, and inside it, explicit handwritten details of her affairs with some of the most powerful men in America, including a married playwright, George S. Kaufman. In an era when women were destroyed for rumors, the existence of the Purple Diary was a death sentence. The press went feral. Tabloids printed quotes out of context, real or fabricated, it didn't matter. To the public, the story of the perfect Hollywood lady turned sinner was irresistible. Astor's reputation collapsed overnight, but Mary Astor didn't run. She walked into court with her head high. Calm, collected, even witty. When asked about the diary, she smiled and said, "I'm a writer. I write many things." It was a performance as brilliant as any role she had ever played, a masterclass in composure. Behind the scenes, the studio panicked. MGM's lawyers fought to suppress the diary, claiming it was private property. The judge eventually ordered it sealed and destroyed, but the damage had already been done. Every whisper in town carried her name like a curse, and yet Astor survived. Her acting ironically saved her. That same year, she delivered a performance in Dodsworth so strong, so emotionally authentic, that the public couldn't resist her comeback. She reminded America that talent outlives scandal. But even decades later, the story of the Purple Diary lingered as a reminder. In Hollywood, a man's sins were passions, a woman's were scandals, and for every Mary Astor who survived, dozens more were erased completely. Because in Hollywood, the price of silence was survival, and no one understood that better than the next name on this list. Dennis Hopper, the wild man who terrified Hollywood. Dennis Hopper didn't just play chaos, he was chaos. He was the kind of man whose presence electrified a room and terrified it at the same time. For him, art and insanity were inseparable. After Easy Rider made him a countercultural god, Hopper was handed absolute creative freedom, no oversight, no limits. It was the worst thing anyone could have done for him. His next project, The Last Movie, became a fever dream of addiction and ego. He took the crew to Peru, surrounded himself with cocaine, guns, and endless nights of delirium. The production devolved into what witnesses later called a drug-fueled apocalypse. Hopper's paranoia became legend. He would sleep in coffins to understand death, fire live ammunition on set for authenticity, and rant about cosmic conspiracies between takes. Some crew members fled the country mid-production, others stayed out of fear or fascination. When the movie bombed, Hollywood shut its doors on him. Overnight, the rebel genius became a liability. For nearly a decade, no one would hire him. He wandered between the desert and derelict hotel rooms, consuming more alcohol and drugs than his body could process. His mind fractured, and his temper made him dangerous. Friends described him as half poet, half bomb. Then in the 1980s, against all odds, Dennis Hopper returned, sober, haunted, sharper than ever. His performances in Apocalypse Now and Blue Velvet were volcanic, as if every ghost he'd buried inside him had come back to speak. The madness was still there, but now it had direction. It became art. Hopper's life was a warning and a wonder, a living example of how Hollywood builds its icons out of broken men. It worships their genius, fuels their addictions, and then stands back to watch them burn. And once they've burned long enough, it resurrects them, for profit. But what happens when the monster isn't destroyed, only hidden in plain sight? Ben Stiller, Hollywood's most privately hated comedian. Ben Stiller has made millions laugh by playing the insecure underdog, the anxious everyman fumbling his way through disaster. But behind that neurotic charm, insiders describe a man whose perfectionism has curdled into quiet cruelty. On set, they call him the Ice Storm. Assistants whisper about the day he fired an entire lighting crew because a bulb flickered mid-take. A production manager recalls being screamed at over a lukewarm coffee. He doesn't shout all the time, one cinematographer said, but when he does, it's surgical, designed to make you feel small. Unlike the flamboyant tyrants of classic Hollywood, Stiller's control is subtle. His silence can freeze a room faster than rage. His smiles are rehearsed. His apologies, rare and clipped, usually come with a follow-up insult. He knows he's brilliant, another insider admitted. He just hasn't figured out how to let anyone else be. And yet, publicly, he's all charm. Humble interviews, grateful soundbites, talk show banter about self-doubt and family. He plays the everyman because it works. It's marketable, relatable, and audiences never see the trail of exhaustion left behind each movie. Stiller's story is less about scandal and more about transformation, how fame slowly drains empathy. The man who made a career out of mocking ego became consumed by it. It's not unique. Hollywood rewards obsession until that obsession turns inward. But where Stiller hides behind politeness, the next man built his entire identity around not hiding anything at all. His cruelty wasn't concealed, it was performed. Chevy Chase, comedy's cruelest legend. There's a saying in show business, never meet your heroes. If that hero was Chevy Chase, the advice might save your sanity. In the 1970s, Chase was the face of American comedy, Saturday Night Live's golden boy, the smirking star of Caddyshack and Vacation. His wit was sharp, his timing perfect, his arrogance intoxicating. He was the kind of performer who could make cruelty look charming until the mask slipped. Behind the scenes, everyone had a story. Writers who quit SNL after being humiliated by him on live television, co-stars who left sets in tears, crew members who called him radioactive. In one infamous moment, Chase reportedly told a gay cast member he wanted to weigh him on camera each week to see if he had AIDS. Even by the brutal standards of 1980s comedy, it was unforgivable. And yet, for years, Hollywood kept forgiving him. Because he was Chevy, because the man who played arrogant jerks so well had made arrogance part of his brand. The problem was, he wasn't acting. As his fame declined, so did his self-control. On the set of Community, his clashes with creator Dan Harmon became legendary. Screaming fits, racial slurs, storming off in the middle of scenes. Donald Glover later revealed Chase had made racist remarks to his face, insisting Glover's success came only because of his skin color. Today, Chase stands as one of comedy's most isolated figures, an exile of his own making. The laughter he once inspired now echoes like an accusation. He once said in an interview, "I guess I never learned how to be fake, but maybe that was the problem. Sometimes what we call honesty is just cruelty with better lighting." And that brings us to the truth that ties all these stories together, the illusion that fame gives life meaning, when in reality it often strips meaning away. Reflection, what the spotlight can't show. 13 stories, 13 faces that once seemed immortal. But beneath the glamour, the genius, and the applause, the same quiet tragedy. Hollywood didn't just build stars, it built prisons made of flashbulbs and mirrors. Inside them lived people like Bing Crosby, whose perfection hid tyranny. Judy Garland, whose innocence was chemically engineered. Loretta Young, who turned motherhood into a lie to protect her image. And Rock Hudson, forced to live a life that wasn't his own. Each of them was trapped between two selves, the one the world wanted and the one the world would never forgive. And that duality, that split between image and identity, is what destroys people faster than fame ever could. It's easy to point at their scandals, their addictions, their cruelty, and call it weakness. But maybe it's something deeper. Maybe the system that worships beauty and power was designed to break the very people who embody it. Because in Hollywood, truth isn't valuable, it's dangerous. Every secret you've heard tonight was hidden by design, crafted, covered, polished, and sold back to you as entertainment. These stories aren't just about the darkness of a few stars, they're about the machine that feeds on them, and yet, the irony remains. The same camera that destroyed them also preserved them forever. Every frame, every song, every smile still lives, perfectly lit, perfectly framed, while the real people behind them vanished into their own shadows. So the next time you watch an old movie and feel the magic, remember, magic always comes with a price, because behind every dream factory, there's a factory for nightmares. For a century, Hollywood has sold us perfection, flawless faces, heroic men, timeless beauty. But every frame hides a story that was never meant to be told. The stars we adored were human, fragile, frightened, desperate to be loved. Some destroyed themselves trying to maintain the illusion. Others were destroyed because they refused to. And when the lights went out, the applause didn't echo, it vanished. These stories aren't about gossip, they're about the cost of being worshipped, about what happens when people become symbols instead of souls. Bing Crosby, Judy Garland, Loretta Young, Rock Hudson, Mary Astor, Dennis Hopper, Chevy Chase, 13 names, 13 warning signs that fame isn't freedom, it's a beautiful cage. But if you think these were the darkest secrets the studios ever kept, you'd be wrong. There are stories buried deeper, scandals the studios paid millions to erase, careers wiped clean from history, and deaths still labeled mysterious. Those are the secrets we'll uncover next, because in Hollywood, the truth doesn't fade, it just waits for someone brave enough to tell it. If you want to keep exploring the untold side of Hollywood's golden age, the scandals, the hidden lives, and the truths buried behind the lights, make sure to subscribe. And if any of these stories change the way you see fame, leave a comment below. Tell us which truth shocked you the most. Your voice keeps history alive.